Earlier this year, President Donald Trump issued an executive order that would have dismantled the Institute of Museum and Library Services, or the IMLS. It was formed in 1996 and is the only federal agency dedicated to supporting the nation's libraries. Currently, there are 125,000 local branches across the U.S. Without this overarching organization, many local libraries, especially those in small and rural communities, wouldn't be able to survive. So, what drove this surprising order, and why does the IMLS matter so much? The action came from the Department of Government Efficiency, which is commonly referred to as DOGE. For much of this year, the agency made headlines for its controversial government reductions and layoffs. As of this month, DOGE was dismantled and no longer exists. As for the IMLS, the initial push by DOGE to break apart the institute was ultimately reversed in court. But for tens of thousands of libraries, it still had an impact, and the move sent a clear message that their funding and future isn't a government priority.
When the executive order was issued by the president in March to dismantle the IMLS, it caused utter chaos and fear, frankly, in the libraries across the nation, because disproportionately those dollars that come out of the IMLS and go to the states are utilized to support services and resources for the small and rural libraries of each state.
That's Kate Laughlin, Executive Director of the National Association for Rural and Small Libraries. While big city libraries often have several ways to bring in reliable funding, like private donorship and endowments, most rural locations don't have the same luxury.
In the small and rural libraries, that doesn't exist. It's often one building with a few staff. Maybe there's a degreed librarian, maybe not, depending on the state. And there is no foundation, and there's no IT department, and there's no marketing department. And so it's not just the resources, the training, the support that the state library provides using those IMLS funds, but they will often be the provider of internet services, IT support. They will often be the group purchase power for the state's interlibrary loan service or circulation software, or even internet access itself. And if you cannot afford in a small or rural library to pay for circulation software or internet access on your own without that support, how do you even serve as a library anymore?
This past November, a U.S. district court ruled against the current administration's attempt to dismantle the IMLS and ordered DOGE to put the department back together. However, the damage was already done. 2 months before the court's ruling, the entire IMLS staff of about 80 people was let go.
Those people had left. My understanding is at this point they're at maybe 30 staff, and it's very hard to administer the programs and services and grant programs of the prior to March IMLS when you're working at a third of your staff nearly.
In addition, because most IMLS grants operate on a reimbursement model, many local libraries couldn't afford to wait for the court's reversal and had to make cuts right away.
Libraries had to determine what they were going to do with their budgets and how they were going to continue to support their communities. So shortening the budgets and tightening them up on collections, cutting programs, cutting hours. In some cases, when it's been coupled with really pernicious state legislation, we're seeing some libraries shutter their doors in terms of hours or even just entirely.
That's Sam Helmick, president of the American Library Association. The reality is that smaller libraries and the IMLS will need some time to recover from what happened this year. For now, funding for next year appears to be safe. But if the IMLS can't build back its staff quickly enough, dispersing those funds into local libraries could see delays. When the agency is at full capacity, Laughlin says it uses funds extremely efficiently. For example, in Arkansas, state library officials calculated that they spend about $850,000 a year on statewide subscriptions using their IMLS grant, a price they can only get by negotiating as a single large buyer. But if each library had to purchase these same resources on its own, the cost would skyrocket.
They figured out that if all the libraries had to purchase independently those services, subscriptions, resources, it would come to approximately $55 million. That's how efficient those dollars are in having our state library agencies administer them on behalf of the small and rural communities of each state. And when you look at the claim of inefficient use or fraudulent use of funding and that sort of thing that were the premise for a lot of these executive orders, that's just not the case. Anyone who's in close and sees what goes on with these dollars knows that the return on investment on every dollar that we spend out of the IMLS, the libraries turn around and turn it into $4 to $5 at minimum.
And in rural areas where alternative sources of funding are scarce, Laughlin says that a missed payment has immediate impacts on the local community, as libraries offer far more than books.
When you have a small rural community whose industry is dying or is dead, and there are whole groups of adults who never really learned how to use a mouse or even have an email address, and they're showing up at their local library saying to the librarian, "How does the internet work? Can you help me?" That's happening every single day. And the librarians, the library workers are sitting down with these small community members and helping them sign up for their first email address, helping them navigate the internet, then helping them be able to do job searching, job coaching, resume writing, these things that they would be left behind. If you cannot use the internet, if you do not have an email address, how do you apply for jobs? How do you apply for job development and training? How do you apply for resources if your family's in trouble and you need to get on whatever list, but you're out in a rural area, there's no office to visit. You have to go online.
Laughlin points out that public library internet is often used for telehealth visits, a convenient option that's rapidly grown in popularity in rural areas. Libraries are also invaluable for education, research, and anyone looking for a free third space to work, learn, or just safely exist in a place that's not home. But above all these benefits, Helmick reminds us that our founding fathers stressed the importance of libraries from the very beginning.
We know that 250 years ago, our founders actually heavily invested in libraries for a very specific reason. This is a unique form of government, and they claim to be trying to create a more perfect union, which suggests that they recognize that you and I would need to grow over time and attempt to become more perfect. You can't do that without access to information, because access to information informs your decisions, it informs your civic engagement, and it gives you the opportunity to develop and grow. And so when Americans do not have access to their libraries, they don't have access to opportunity to grow. They don't have the opportunity to have a more perfect union and to grow as a nation. We lose some of our economic development, our literacy rates, our connection, but I would even argue our national security, because a literate and educated and informed nation is a safer one. We lose a lot when we don't have access to our libraries.
As the IMLS recovers from the fallout of the executive order and its eventual reversal, many libraries will need support from people like you and me. Helmick says there are several ways you can give back to ensure your local branch stays open.
What this process with the executive order has reminded me is that liberty and literacy cannot defend itself. So thank you for showing up for your libraries, whether that's getting a card, using the library, or reaching out to your representatives. You can find out more at ala.org/advocacy.
To find out more about Kate Laughlin, Sam Helmick, and all of our featured guests, visit viewpointsradio.org. For more behind the scenes, check out Viewpoints Radio on X, Facebook, and Instagram. This segment was written and produced by Grace Galanti and Amira Zaveri. Our studio manager is Jason Dickey. I'm Marty Peterson.